This episode of Simulation Nation is brought to you by Avkin Incorporated, your one-stop shop for everything wearable simulator and standardized patient.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simulation Nation. Today, we are going to be talking about affordable ways to have live people inside of simulation. And we have some unique perspectives because in the beginning, that was pretty much what we were doing, was finding affordable ways to have live people of all different genders, ages, backgrounds to come and be in simulation. But along the way, we've talked to a lot of people who have also added and contributed to other ideas in terms of creative ways to be able to do this. And I feel like that is the number one stumbling block for a lot of people wanting to get started, is they always feel like, well, I can't afford it. I don't have budget. I don't have leadership, salaries to be able to do this. And so that really holds them back from being able to go forward. They kind of just stop. And it's, well, until I can get money or until I can do these things, I'm going to kind of wait. But people who have pushed through and said, oh, let me find, this friend who's willing to jump in and get started, or let me, do these other creative ways of finding people, it has opened other doors for other people to see that doing it through just regular old budget funding approvals is not the only way to do simulation with live people.
Yeah. And I don't know what the name of the triangle is, but that's one point of the triangle is time, one point of the triangle is quality, and then the third is budget. So if you want a good quality outcome, you're either going to have to figure out the ways to manage budget, or you're going to have to put in some time. The way that I managed that was really by offsetting some of my workload. So instead of doing one of the simulations that we always did with mannequins, we, subbed it out for starting our pilot SP program. And the success of that just, again, took off. The one caveat I will say is, if you are listening to this and are thinking about it, please make sure that you're also listening to the podcast that we're going to be putting out also this season related to the 3 essentials that was related to including live people or human simulation, because I think that you can't just throw anybody in there, right? Yeah. It's really important that you're thinking about the essential pieces and what's going to make it good. Those of you who have had experiences where you have tried an SP program, maybe just that first thing and it didn't go well, I also encourage you to listen to it, because I think that there's a missing piece to that, right?
I've heard that a lot too, in terms of people trying it out. It didn't go great right off the start, or again, there was issues, there was, hiccups to work through, and they kind of saw that as, well, if this is what it's always going to be, it's not sustainable, and then they'd stop. And there are a lot of ways to say, the first time you're trying it out, you're going to find a lot of hiccups. And no, it's not sustainable. If you're doing it the same way every single time and not learning and it's not changing, yes, that is not sustainable.
Right.
But it does get easier. You do learn, you do find ways around it. And now where we are in terms of the amount of people who have now started SP programs, or including live people in simulation, because I don't want to limit this to just an SP conversation. Really just having live people inside of the simulation. It's about the fact that there are so many ways to get resources, whether that be different Facebook groups that are inside of simulation, whether it be some of the forums on SSH and things along those lines. But there's a lot of ways.
Healthy Sim's huge.
Tons of stuff. But for you to be able to put out, hey, I'm having this issue, I'm running into this roadblock, how have other people solved this? Again, it is helpful because now you do kind of have a little bit more of a community or sounding board to get feedback on.
Yeah.
But let's start kind of where our background is, kind of in terms of you wanting to go forward and, utilize standardized patients, but you were told you can do it if it costs no money. So where were you at that time, and kind of how did you go forward?
Well, I think the even lower hanging fruit is how you became an SP. Mm-hmm. Where it is by association. She is my daughter. So at about 16, you portrayed a role.
Yep. It was summertime, and you basically said to me, do you want to make $14 an hour? And I said, yeah, I do. You said, okay, you're going to show up here and you're going to be an abused daughter. This is what you need to read.
We didn't really abuse her.
Yeah, well, fake. And yeah, I remember at the time, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Again, I got paid more than minimum wage. I got to do acting, and it was like, I think it was like 8 hours. It was a long day, but I remember it was like, oh, this is great. I come in for one day, I do full 8 hours, I get paid, whatever it was, $100 some. And at that time, that was
money in the bank.
Money. That was good money.
But there are many people who don't necessarily pay their family members to do the SP role. I mean, that was, again, the policy at the university that I worked at is if we were getting paid to do something, she was at a pediatric hospital portraying this, if the university was getting paid, then we would be paying our SPs.
Yeah.
So in that situation, but there's lots of people that have their mom come in and portray a role. There's many people that have their children coming in, or even having retired nursing faculty that come back and portray a role. The beauty in that is you get to try it, you get to get feedback from the learners, and you also, it's kind of that no fuss, no muss rule, right?
Yeah.
Like it's pretty easy. You can train the one individual to portray that role. Then maybe they're committing, 5 or 6 hours for you to complete that task, whatever it is. It ends up being so much more valuable. And I think at the end of the day, it's considering that return on experience, right? Is it worth that extra little bit of time to recruit somebody from your family or somebody, a neighbor, maybe even? We've done all kinds of things really creatively with recruiting people that are by association close. So I would say that's probably the lowest hanging fruit.
I will say, though, that you are limited. You're really only going to be able to do that for 1, maybe 2 simulations.
Yeah.
But you really can't expend, you can't say, oh, I want to switch over all of my psych simulations and I'm going to have my neighbor come in and do it, because then that ends up being how many hours? Like, how big are your cohort sizing? How many times are they going to have to do it?
Right.
Are they dependable that they're going to be there, whatever, those 6 days you may need them. But when you're doing it in a more limited fashion of like, hey, I need you these 2 days for 5 hours. Are you willing to come in? I'll do a little training with you. I'll buy you lunch, whatever. Then that's where it's more feasible. But if you're trying to start expanding it beyond that, doing that kind of like, hey, you help me, I'll help you situation, you're gonna reach the cap a lot sooner with it. So it's the lowest hanging fruit, but just know that you're gonna outgrow it fairly quick.
Right, but it's about getting that early win and getting student feedback about the experience, so that when you're taking this now to the next level, you have backbone, you have justification, your learners are excited about growing into the next thing, and then you typically get a little bit more support. Again, to say that we had a robust budget at any point in time, and we were doing up to 700 hours of simulation, of SP simulation, and that included some simulations that had 2 SPs, but up to 700 in any given semester. Our budget was bare bones, and most academic settings, it's always going to be. So let's have that honest conversation, right?
And I will say, just on that same note, I would also prefer, if you have it as a neighbor or a family member coming and portraying the role, than another faculty member. Because typically when you do have another faculty member coming in, and it is that like, hey, can you just swing by and do this psych sim for me really quick or something like that, a lot of times that faculty member, unless there's really good conversation and communication beforehand, they go in and they want to combine all of the worst patients they've ever had and then come in and make it so that then it's a really complex scenario. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've done consulting. They've always refer to this one day that they brought that one faculty member in, and basically the whole day went crazy because this faculty member went from that they were seeing people on the wall, and then they were saying that they have a cousin who owns the hospital wing, and then but they were combining all of the most challenging things they faced into one grandiose performance. So unless it's going to be that you guys have character descriptions and are more vetted, I think it's almost better when you have someone coming in who's like, oh, teach me. I don't really know how to do this. I want to learn how to portray a patient, and they're a little more timid. You're not going to have them go as over the top as if you're bringing in someone who has personal experience or maybe personal bias into that situation.
Well, there's also a power dynamic concern. Again, it should be faculty members that the students are not currently in the class with. However, I do agree with her, but I would then again refer you to those 3 essentials, and making sure that those 3 essentials that we're going to talk about in another podcast are really reinforced and hit home, if that is kind of your only resource to really, again, get that initial early win. I think the other big thing that is fairly low-hanging fruit or lower budget is the idea of the federal work study program. And this is something that there's many students at college campuses across the United States that qualify for this program. And the federal government pays 75% of their hourly rate. So whatever your minimum wage salary, because that's typically what students will get paid, whatever the minimum wage is for your particular state, and then just take 25% of that. That's the hourly rate that you're going to pay. But these students go through interviews. You can also do a little audition with them, and then you give them set hours that they're supposed to be coming and doing those simulations. So you already know that your Thursday simulations are covered with 2 of the work study students that have availability. That gives you the ability to expand it a little bit more. Again, stick to those 3 essentials, make sure that you're getting quality people, but it does give you a very low budget way to expand your program solely. I did incorporated the federal work study program because I wanted the human simulation program to grow much faster than what we could actually grow the course. It took some time for the course that we created, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the course that we created to really take on with more and more students enrolling in the course and what we could handle. And so those federal work study students helped me a lot in the lab skills. So think about pharmacology lab where, they're asking questions and having to take vital signs and things along those lines. It allowed me to expand the offering to some of the simulation some of the skills lab arenas as well.
Yeah, and I think that with thinking about creatively, like you can start then with maybe 5 in terms of what you're thinking for looking at those students coming in, running it in terms of not necessarily having additional help or anything along those lines. You're going to need to also make sure that that's scaled in a way that's manageable, because again, you can't just go from 1 or 2 and then bump that up to 15 or 16 because there's way too much in terms of managing the program. That again, that's another option to make it a little bit wider in terms of how many simulations they can be in. But once you start to get to that 5 number, you're going to need the support from a program management standpoint. And if you don't have something built in to start helping you with your program management, again, you're going to kind of start to feel that you've reached the top in terms of
right.
That,
I mean, again, it's also could be a negotiation of workload allocation of, okay, rather than it being just that I'm substituting out simulations, which basically didn't a lot for any workload allocation change for me, then it came into a negotiation of, okay, maybe this is 20% of my workload is managing this program, so you can grow it. Again, once you get leadership bought in, again, it's hard, and I get it, but slowly progressing that workload allocation so that you can begin to start thinking about programmatic growth. Again, it depends on how receptive your leadership is to it, but it is an idea or an option for that low hanging fruit where you're not necessarily having to put in huge budgets or make big changes as far as workload goes.
Yeah. And then I feel like the next one is talking about the course that we had at the University of Delaware. So that was a 3-credit course where basically any student was able to apply to be inside of this course. So again, you would have theater students, but you'd also have pre-med students. There was veterinary took off for a while where we had a lot of veterinary students coming in, but really it could be anybody. And we saw that in the beginning, it was probably more 50-50 between theater and pre-med. And then it really started to grow more in the pre-med arena because they saw that they had the opportunity to play the role of the patient and it fulfilled one of their creative arts. And so that was a nice it ties still into healthcare, but I still get this creative art. So that was something I was taught between nursing and theater, co-taught this course where basically, again, you could have all of these different students coming in, and the course was that they would be a standardized patient, they would go through training, and then they would fulfill 32 hours of simulation, and that was basically what their course load would have been, was 32 hours of sim. So that's always what we shot for, that any given student would get 32 hours of simulation throughout the semester.
Yeah, and I think a big thing with that, with that course piece is we created our own course, and it took forever to get that through. It started off as a experimental course, and then it was it went into some other course title, and then it finally got approved by the floor of the curriculum for the university. So it took a while. And it was also cross-credited between theater and nursing. And so, again, that's a little bit of a struggle of how payment goes out for all of that. So one of the ways that we have found since that time is that almost every university has an internship opportunity. It's a course already created. And so that internship, this can count for that internship opportunity. Students can sign up to do that. It's not as compelling as something where it fulfills a requirement that the university has set forward. So ours filled the arts and humanities requirement, where an internship doesn't necessarily fulfill a requirement unless there is a discovery learning option or some kind of, active learning course that is required. But the internship opportunity really does allow you to expand your offerings. It also allows you to do that interview and audition process, just like we mentioned, because they're going to need that even for their internship. But that really ended up being something that we used later in our, as we actually built this program to be almost, scaffolded up to where they could actually get a full-on minor for it. But the idea is you can start with something that the university already has. It makes it a lot easier to just plug into that and to reach out to advisors to offer this. Think about if you have any health profession students that are, wanting to go on. So think pre-health professions, pre-vet, pre-dental, pre-PA, pre-physical therapy, whatever it is, they may be interested in taking this internship opportunity so that they can add it to their resume. A lot of the students that took our course that were pre-med talked about how when they went in for their interviews for med school, they pretty much only talked about this course because it set them apart as being different and as unique.
Yeah, it was really, I think that all around, as someone who actually took the course and was a student of the course, it was something that was really fun. And again, we hear it time and time again that it was a really fun opportunity. And so it was always something that once we started to get traction where students knew about the course, it was really easy because it all became word of mouth in terms of I had a friend who took this course last semester, my roommate took it last semester, whatever it was. And then those were the people who were applying, and then they would come in for their interview and audition. And again, that interview and audition, we would only ever turn away a handful of people
in the whole 10
time.
years that we were there. It was so maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, maybe one student every other semester, but it would go down to if there were scheduling conflicts where literally they'd be like, I'm pre-med and I have 2 jobs and I also am doing clinical right now and I have, it would be these million things and be like, okay, you don't have time to be able to do simulation. You won't be available. But it would either be that or it would just be there was 0 simulations we could put them in, or we were concerned for psychological safety of the scenario itself. Those were the only 2 times that we would ever really turn people away from not being able to participate in the course. But all in all, you can make it. So that's very common in theater too, that you can make it where they have to interview to be in the course. So that was more understood in that type of world. And then once we had progression with it in word of mouth, the interview and audition process really was, it didn't seem like that big of a hurdle, but I would encourage you to make sure that you do an interview and audition. Don't just make it open enrollment where anyone can come in. But we started small, and I think that was the other key, was starting with only 4 students and starting to build. And again, at the time, it was an independent course, so it really wasn't something where we were worried about mass applying or anything along those lines, but having a small group of students and then building it. I think we built it to 9, and then it built up to 14 or 15 from there. And then we had
to get to 17 because that was the number of break even for a course. Mm-hmm. So it was independent study, then experimental, and then it was a full-on course, and we had to have at least 17 enrolled, which we typically had about 20 to 25.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like then we petered out, and it was between 20 and 25 was our average for what we needed. And we would always go through, too, and figure out what the hours were for the semester, what we were anticipating, and then look at what enrollment needed to be to fulfill the hours. And so, again, we never really had issues in terms of needing more enrollment or anything along those lines. But the thing with that is you have so much of the program built into the course that it helps scaling. It doesn't feel like, again, you have to do these monumental, then you hit your glass ceiling and you've got to find a different avenue. Where I feel like some of the other options of people filling in or doing volunteer, it does feel like you're going to get to more of the glass ceiling sooner because you don't have all of these program structures built in. So when it is a course, you already have set times that everybody needs to be there. So again, when you're doing training, it's your class time. It's what's already on your schedule of what you've agreed to be able to do. When you need to do dress rehearsals, again, that's already built in because it's like, yep, this is your prep work before you're going to go into simulation. There's not a conversation or a debate on how you approach that. And then keeping quality and standard, you get a grade. So that was factored into
And they
the course
cared,
as well.
especially those pre-med students, they cared
They
very
really cared.
much.
And again, that whole professional aspect of, well, what do you do when they don't show up? What do you do when that doesn't happen? Now they're college students. Of course we deal with professionalism. Of course they're not robots, right? I can't get them out of the closet and plug them in. But we discuss professionalism and how that's attached to their grade from day one, and you have all of these different pieces that you need to have an SP program running. It's already built into your course as a natural cycle. So you're not trying to then build up a program plus figuring out your actual SPs. It's kind of like they grow together. And I think that that's the really nice part of when it is that course dynamic, is it doesn't feel like you're going to go like, okay, this is great until here, and then we've got to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start again. It's like you just keep growing upon it. So for us, how we continue to keep growing beyond just, again, when we had 20 students and we had 32 hours of SP per student and we were factoring it in that way, we also had students who would want to come back and do it again. I was one of them. I was one of the very first students who was like, hey, I want to keep doing this. This is really great.
So just as a caveat, yes, I taught the course, but I co-taught it with theater. So I was not giving Megan her grade that my theater partner was.
I don't think anyone's thinking that deep into this. But,
Well, there's a lot of academic people listening to this. I just want to make sure that's very clear.
but for me, I wanted to stay on and keep doing it because, I loved it. It was fun. It was a great, like for me, it was one of those, like, I'll just come back and do it. Like, I don't need class credit. It was just fun. But we actually then started with advanced students. And so then we would have the advanced students that were going to come back and basically either fill in for hours that we needed, where again, if we didn't have enough basics,
because it was growing.
Do it.
Yeah.
And again, it was just kind of also like, sure, people were seeing how great it was to have the SPs in the sim. Why not do more? We were doing more interprofessionally. Why not do more? Why not reduce, sizing of groups? And I think that that is one thing I look back on that I really liked, was we were able then to make our sizing for the simulation smaller. So like for psych, it was 2 students in every single simulation. We did do, the first one was one-on-one, 1 nursing student, 1 SP, because we didn't have those same constraints. So it was also really nice because it was kind of like when you wanted it, it was more of like, okay, well, let's add to the course. Okay, what's that going to take? Oh, a few things here and there. We need to tweak this. We need to modify this. Let's have this conversation. But then we could add them in. And so it just didn't feel like this, like, sorry, we only have this many resources. We can only do so much. It felt like we could really start to expand it. And then when we had the advanced students, again, that when like people wanted to come back, they wanted to fill in for hours. They wanted to help run some of the trainings in terms of teaching the new students how to do it. They did a lot in terms of just watching for quality control, of watching them perform.
That's what I was going to
giving them
say.
notes.
They really became our quality control
They were
because
our eyes and
they
ears.
fell in love with these particular roles in their course that we call it the basic course, but in the beginning course, and then they fell in love, and so they were able to translate that to the next group through coaching and feedback and things like that.
And obviously for the advanced students, they were normally like ones who just loved it, and they were the ones that were like, this is great. I love the feedback side of it. I love sim. I love to be a part of it. So it was also kind of like you were then getting like the top students from the cohort beforehand, being like, come back, let's have you involved again, and using their strengths, right? Like some of them were really great in terms of like, I remember CPAT was one of our students who came back and did it, and I just remember he was so good in terms of like, he was an EMT at the time and was helping run the ambulance, and so I just remember he was so good at thinking through the pediatric dad role in terms of like how a dad who had a daughter with chronic illness and like being able to put the machines together, like phenomenal. And I remember it was just like we'd always put him back in there because he was so good at teaching other people. And sometimes the students just had natural leans. Like I just can think of certain people who just naturally lean towards a character really well. And
talk to Megan about Mildred. Loves Mildred.
But like even ones that like, I'm thinking of Bobby right now when he did the manic patient, and it was like he just leaned in so well, and I had never done the role as someone who was teaching him how to do it. He took to it, and then it was kind of like, okay, great, you teach the next set because you love this and you're more connected to it than even I am.
Absolutely.
So great, you go ahead and take it. And then that's where you start to have it where you have this system that really starts to just feed into one another.
Yeah.
And I think that was the beauty of it, was that it was able to just keep expanding and growing, because you can kind of start setting it off where your last cohort's training your new cohort, and it really started to feed into one another. And then the community that got built, I think, is the other really nice part that I don't think anyone really saw coming in terms of it, but being able to then start having people from the community be involved.
Right. So that feeds into the whole volunteer, because you were saying no glass ceiling.
Yeah.
But my point there was a glass ceiling as far as age went.
Yes.
Right? Because you don't typically have someone over the age of 25 or so in an undergraduate course. So where we really were able to kind of break that glass ceiling was having community members that were able to audit the course and come back in.
Yeah.
But again, because the course was already there, we could just plug them into that course, and they were a part.
Exactly. This is when our training times are. This is when you need to come and be prepared. And we also knew too, like, as someone who was helping to run the program, I knew too, like, again, our adults who are the community members, it was like, I'm not going to put the same level of, like, with dress rehearsal, I was going to be a lot more flexible when the dress rehearsals were going to be for them, opposed to it being like, it is 3:00 on a Tuesday, and you know what I mean? Right. It was like, okay, we'll do the dress rehearsal with the other students, and then when I can set aside time with you, we'll go through it and we'll run through it together. But having the community members, I felt like being able to plug that in to the student community. Like, it was kind of like we already had this moving system that was feeding into one another. It went well. Again, people really enjoyed it. So now adding in the community members, it was kind of like moving them into an already oiled machine, right? So then having this connection between community members who were older, and then also connecting them to these 20-year-olds and having them in simulation together, learning from one another, hanging out together, socially, all of these different things.
It really was a beautiful thing to see. And at that point, we had started doing graduate level work too. So again, we were adding in the geriatric piece of this that the FNPs needed. So the idea that one thing fed the other is so true, and it kind of grew organically. I mean, this is what we're talking about is something over a course of 10 years. Yeah. So for those of you that are listening, just start small. We did that independent study course for 2 years, 4 students, 2 simulations for 4 semesters. 4 semesters, 2 years before we really started to grow it. That's where I had brought in those work study students, because I wanted to grow it faster than what we were offering. Because I could see the benefit in it. One of the other things that Megan just mentioned was the whole volunteer program. There are a lot of programs that have volunteers. Again, it's a potential glass ceiling, but if you can get a retirement community that is interested in giving back, it can really explode. I mean, there are programs that have 20 to 30 volunteers that come in, and they have a thank you luncheon for them at the end of every semester. I know St. Catherine's gives out little, like, kind of Grammy awards to them, and does fun things with them. But you're building a community, like almost a sub-community within that retirement community, but they feel as though they are really helping. Again, they are probably at some point soon going to be consumers of healthcare and care very much how they are treated and cared for in the healthcare system. And so they can really, again, add such value as far as a volunteer program goes.
Yeah. I think that having the volunteer program is another thing that you can keep growing it. But the point is that if you have something that starts to feed off of one another, and you can be bringing back this more senior vetted students to help train new ones, and you have this continual cycle, that's really what you need it to be. And whether that be a course, a volunteer program, an internship program, or something like that, you're really trying to get that momentum and the synergy of being able to have it where it's all feeding back in, and you can kind of be more at the top, leading it, managing it, but you're not in the weeds, and you shouldn't be in the weeds this shouldn't be that you are the only person who can possibly train every new SP for the next 5 years, right? Like, that can't be the goal. So having something where you start to find people who are like, this is awesome, I love it, you pulling that person aside and being like, hey, you're really great at this, I'd love you to come back and start training people. Again, you're going to start seeing that feed system where it starts naturally progressing and growing. But I think that it's just encouraging that there's a lot of different avenues to approach it in terms of affordable ways, affordable, creative ways of bringing people in. I think that people always are concerned that people aren't going to be interested. And I just have to say, as someone who does it and has done it, it's so fun. And it's just something that is like, It's such a stress reliever. It's enjoyable. If you
She's
like
speaking of this
acting,
from the SP perspective.
yeah, if you like it, you want to come back and do it. And then that means you want to help run the program. So when you're doing it and you're help building upon it, like we talked to Karen from IU, it's the same thing where you're just getting endorphin hit after endorphin hit after endorphin hit. So you want to keep being a part of it. And so I think just anytime you're getting started with this, you're going to hit some roadblocks and you're going to hit some stumbles. But just know that you're also looking for those people who are really excited that want to come back. Those are your people who are going to help propel this forward, where you're not going to have to keep taking it on or keep vying for budget, hires, and all of these other things that are going to take a lot of time to get it started. But looking for those people who are excited by it, and again, asking them to stay on, having those conversations, that's where you're going to start seeing this move forward. But I think any type of these creative ways of bringing people in and then building the sustainability underneath of it, that's what you're looking for in terms of being able to grow affordable ways of having people.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I will say, you said, like, look for the people that are most excited, and that is 100%. I mean, I can remember early on, I would just be like, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being our SPs, because I never realized the benefit to the SPs, actually, until Megan took the course. And then she kept saying, why are you, like, so thankful and appreciate. This is the best course of the university. Mm-hmm. So you should be saying you're welcome for being selected for this. And it really changed the momentum and my perspective, because again, from my perspective, I didn't realize how much it was benefiting them till we really started collecting self-assessment essays and things like that. Early on, it was just an independent study course. They were just doing a certain amount of hours. So as we started to learn more, it really opened my eyes up to the possibilities. And we listened to what the SPs had to say about ways that the program could expand. So listen to your SPs about ways that you might even get more potential volunteers. There might be a volunteer requirement or a community service requirement at your institution for your students, so that this may be a way that they could put in community service hours. There's lots of different ways to do this that are, maybe you can't scale to the level of 700 hours of simulation in a semester, but maybe 100, maybe 150. Mm-hmm. But giving your students that exposure makes all the difference in the world to their confidence and competence once they get out into the clinical environment. They're much more comfortable in their own skin. They understand what is expected of them as a professional, as they're transferring from that social relationship into a therapeutic relationship. It just makes all the difference in the world to test this in simulation and then move forward to testing it in their clinical environments and getting that feedback.
Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, it's just something that, looking at the creative side of what this can be and how it does grow people, it helps you understand how to then advocate for it. And I will say that as someone who had student after student, again, we'd have 20 students in one cohort and then move to the next 20, and it was constantly rotating. But I really, as the SP educator, I really cared about each individual person and knowing what some of their goals were, because I knew that they were coming in for a course credit. They're not getting paid $20 an hour to be there, but knowing like, oh, you want to be an EMT. Great. I'm going to put you in some of the EMS simulations that we have, and that's going to give you some insight to that side of things you want to do. I can remember one student say, I have to drop my brother off at school at 8 a.m., so I'm here on campus at 8:30, and my first class doesn't start till 10:30.
They were a commuter.
Yeah. I made a conscious note of being like, I'm going to give you early morning sims, because then you can get it done in that free time that you're already here, and I'm not going to.
Nobody else wants to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly. Sounds great. So it was just like, that's something that you can do in terms of these affordable programs, is get to know them individually, spend the extra time to know what they care about, what they want to gain from it, and take the time and energy. Like, again, know what's going on with their family. Ask them about things. Ask them about their personal life. Get to know them. It does build that.
Make it a community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make the community, and that is how you're going to find the longest sustainable growth traction, is you being able to just invest in them as much as they're investing in the program. And I think at the end of the day, there's 1,000,001 ways of approaching this, and there's so many nuances in terms of programs and HR, liability, payment, all these different things. At the end of the day, you're looking for people who are excited, people who want to invest, people where it can be feeding on each other and continuing forward, and then you putting the time and energy in to knowing who they are, knowing what some of their goals are, and investing back in your standardized patients, whether they be there for a volunteer program, an internship, or whatever it may be. But I think there's a lot of different nuances in terms of what that looks like. But at the end of the day, don't give up. when you hit the early snags. There's going to be the early snags. There's going to be the early things that have to be worked through. But just know that that's what they are. They're growing pains, and you can get to the other side of them. It really, like we've heard it time and time again. And also know that this is something that's really rewarding as a standardized patient, and the more you continue and the more you grow it, you're going to find your people who are really excited about it and who want to continue to invest. I think that's the other really exciting part.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today on Simulation Nation. If you guys have any questions on how to do affordable standardized patients
or other ideas,
simulation, leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.